Ukraine refuses to surrender Mariupol as Russia warns of humanitarian catastrophe. Ukraine on Monday rejected Russian calls to surrender the port city of Mariupol, where residents are besieged with little food, water and power in a humanitarian crisis that is increasing pressure on European leaders to toughen sanctions on Moscow. Ukraine's government defiantly rejected Russian calls for Ukrainian forces in Mariupol to lay down their arms in exchange for safe passage out of the city and humanitarian corridors to be opened from 1000 Moscow time, 7 o'clock GMT, on Monday. There can be no question of any surrender, laying down of arms, the Ukrainska Pravda news portal cited Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk as saying, "We have already informed the Russian side about this. Mariupol has suffered some of the heaviest bombardments since Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24. Many of its 400,000 residents remain trapped as fighting rages on the streets around them." Vereshchuk said over 7,000 people were evacuated from Ukrainian cities through humanitarian corridors on Sunday, more than half from Mariupol. She said the government planned to send nearly 50 buses there on Monday for further evacuations. Russia and Ukraine have made agreements throughout the war on humanitarian corridors to evacuate civilians, but have accused each other of frequent violations of those. The crisis in Mariupol and other devastated Ukrainian cities is likely to feature heavily in discussions between European Union leaders this week as they consider imposing tougher sanctions on Russia, including an oil embargo. EU governments will take up the discussion among foreign ministers on Monday, before US President Joe Biden arrives in Brussels on Thursday for summits with NATO's 30 allies, as well as the EU and in a Group of 7, G7, format including Japan. Diplomats told Reuters that Baltic countries including Lithuania are pushing for an embargo as the next logical step, while Germany is warning against acting too quickly because of already high energy prices in Europe. In his latest appeal for help from abroad, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the Israeli parliament by video link on Sunday and questioned Israel's reluctance to sell its Iron Dome missile defense system to Ukraine. "Everybody knows that your missile defense systems are the best, and that you can definitely help our people, save the lives of Ukrainians, of Ukrainian Jews," said Zelensky, who is of Jewish heritage. Zelensky also welcomed the mediation efforts of Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who has held numerous calls with him and Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said in his daily video address to Ukrainians that, "Sooner or later we will begin to have talks with Russia, possibly in Jerusalem." Mariupol's council said on Telegram that several thousand residents had been deported to Russia over the past week. Russian news agencies said buses had carried hundreds of refugees from Mariupol to Russia in recent days. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield told CNN the deportation accounts were disturbing and unconscionable, if true, but said Washington had not yet confirmed them. Reuters could not independently verify the claims. Russia denies targeting civilians. Greece's consul general in Mariupol, the last EU diplomat to evacuate the city, said it was joining the ranks of places known for having been destroyed in wars. "What I saw, I hope no one will ever see," he said. Kyiv and Moscow reported some progress last week toward a political formula that would guarantee Ukraine's security, while keeping it outside NATO, a key Russian demand, though each side accused the other of dragging things out. Few advances. Capturing Mariupol would help Russian forces secure a land corridor to the Crimea Peninsula at Moscow annexed from Ukraine in 2014. Putin says Russia's special operation is aimed at disarming Ukraine and rooting out dangerous nationalists. Western nations call it an aggressive war of choice and have imposed punishing sanctions aimed at crippling Russia's economy. Ukraine and its Western backers say Russian ground forces have made few advances in the last week, concentrating instead on artillery and missile strikes. Zelensky's advisor Alexei Arestovich said on Sunday there had been a relative lull over the past 24 hours, with practically no rocket strikes on cities. He said front lines were practically frozen. 3 civilians were killed and 5 were injured as a result of Russian shelling on Sunday in the east of the country, said Pavel Kirilenko, head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. In the Kharkiv region 1 person was killed and 1 injured, and in Luhansk region 2 were killed and 1 injured. In the capital Kiev, Mayor Vitaly Klitschko reported several explosions in Podol district and said rescue teams were putting out a large fire at the shopping center. He said at least 1 person was killed. Reuters was not able to verify the reports. The UN Human Rights Office said at least 902 civilians had been killed as of Saturday, though the real toll was probably much higher. A 5 km area around a chemicals plant in the besieged northeastern city of Sumy. The plant was hazardous due to an ammonia leak, Sumy Regional Governor Dmytro Zhyvytskyyy said. It was not known what caused the leak. About 10 million Ukrainians have been displaced, including some 3.4 million who have fled to neighboring countries such as Poland, the UN Refugee Agency said. In the southern city of Kherson, video seen by Reuters showed dozens of protesters, some wrapped in Ukraine's blue and yellow flag, chanting, "Go home," in Russian at 2 military vehicles with Russian markings. The vehicles turned and left. "I want the war to be over, I want them, Russian forces, to leave Ukraine in peace," said Margarita Morozova, 87, who survived Nazi Germany's siege of Leningrad in World War II and has lived in Kharkiv, eastern Ukraine, for the past 60 years.
Adolf Hitler. Putin likened to Hitler after Ukrainians deported to work camps in distant parts of Russia. Vladimir Putin was likened to Adolf Hitler yesterday after reports his invading troops were forcibly deporting Ukrainians to sinister Russian work camps. Up to 5,000 residents were bundled away from the besieged city of Mariupol, with many taken to Taganrog in southwestern Russia to support Putin's deranged claim he was liberating Ukraine. Mariupol Mayor Vadim Boychenko likened Moscow's actions to the horrific events of World War II, when the Nazis forcibly captured people. Pavlo Kirilenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Administration, said, "The occupiers are sending the residents of Mariupol to filtration camps, checking their phones and seizing their Ukrainian documents." Ukrainian MP Inna Sovsun told Times Radio yesterday people were being taken to very distant parts of Russia and forced to sign papers saying that they will stay in that area for 2 or 3 years, and they will work for free in those areas. Asked if this was slave labor, she said, "It is, yes. It is." Condemning the Kremlin's vicious and a barbarian attack on innocent civilians, Boris Johnson also drew a direct comparison with the actions of the Nazis under Adolf Hitler in the 1940s. The Prime Minister warned the Russian president would not stop at Ukraine, and a Putin victory would usher in the beginning of a new age of intimidation across the whole of Eastern Europe and give the green light for autocrats everywhere. The Tory leader said Putin is in a total panic about revolution in Moscow, and trying to snuff out the flame of freedom in Ukraine. He added, "If Putin succeeds in crushing Ukraine, it will be the green light for autocrats everywhere in the Middle East, in the Far East. This is a turning point for the world. It's a moment of choice. It's a choice between freedom and oppression." Putin's forces have forced 10 million Ukrainians from their homes. Supposed humanitarian corridors out of blitzed cities Kiev, Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Sumy have been targeted by Moscow missiles, Ukraine said. And escape routes leading only to Russia or Putin-backed Belarus were branded immoral by the United Nations. But in the latest humiliating blow to Putin, the deputy commander of his Black Sea Fleet was killed yesterday. Andrei Polyi was the 6th top military officer Russia has lost since the invasion of Ukraine. After the killing of 5 army generals, first-ranked Captain Andrei Polyi, 51, was the first senior naval officer killed in the war. Konstantin Tsarenko, secretary of the Public Council of the Sevastopol-Nakhimov Naval School and friend to Polyi, confirmed the officer's death in a marine skirmish near Mariupol. Napoleon was born in Kiev and in 1993 refused to take the Ukrainian military oath, instead serving in the Russian Northern Fleet. He had earlier served on the Russian nuclear missile cruiser Peter the Great, and as deputy head of the Russian Naval Academy in Sevastopol in annexed Crimea. In yet more bad news for Russia, a U.S. general warned its forces were running out of manpower and ammunition, and had just a week left to conquer Ukraine. Lieutenant Gen Ben Hodges, a veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, said the invaders were in trouble. He insisted, that's why they have reached out to China for help and why they are now recruiting Syrians. Russian generals are running out of time, ammunition, and manpower. He said Russia had already committed half its entire combat power to the war, adding, at the height of our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we were about 29% committed, and it was difficult to sustain that. He said that on April 1st, around 130,000 Russian families are required to send their sons aged 18 to 25 to conscription centers to be inducted into the Russian army. Lieutenant Gen Hodges said, we should do all we can to influence that next intake. If we can get some of those families to join those who are already showing the courage to protest, that would send shockwaves across Russia.
President Zelensky, welcome to the show.
Greetings to you all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you.
President Biden has called Vladimir Putin a war criminal. And yet, you have called for negotiations with him. Will it be hard, will it be painful for you to have to sit down with Putin were he to agree and negotiate with him?
I am ready for negotiations with him. I was ready over the last 2 years. And I think that without negotiations, we cannot end this war. I think that all the people who think that this dialogue is shallow and that it is not going to resolve anything, they just don't understand that this is very valuable. If there is just 1% chance for us to stop this war, I think that we need to take this chance. We need to do that. I can tell you about the result of this negotiations. In any case, we're losing people on a daily basis, innocent people on the ground. Russian forces have come to exterminate us, to kill us. And we have demonstrated the dignity of our people and our army, that we are able to deal a powerful blow. We are able to strike back. But unfortunately, our dignity is not going to preserve the lives. So I think that we have to use any format, any chance in order to have a possibility of negotiating, the possibility of talking to Putin. But if these attempts fail, that would mean that this is a third world war.
You know the Russian demands. They want you to recognize that Crimea is part of Russia, that the two republics in the Donbass are independent republics. They want a guarantee, perhaps in the Ukrainian constitution, that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. Are you willing to make those compromises?
There are compromises for which we cannot be ready as an independent state. Any compromises related to our territorial integrity and our sovereignty, and the Ukrainian people have spoken about it. They have not greeted Russian soldiers with a bunch of flowers. They have greeted them with bravery. They have greeted them with weapons in their hands. So forcibly, you cannot make yourself a friend. You cannot curry favor with the citizens of another country forcibly. You cannot just make a president of another country to recognize anything by the use of force. So everything that they are doing is not just about politics, it's about reality. They have made their way to Kherson region, but people are feeling hatred towards them, animosity, and people will continue to kill Russians because Russians have killed their children. You cannot reverse this situation anymore. So you cannot just demand from Ukraine to recognize some territories as independent republics. These compromises are simply wrong. I cannot recognize, firstly, as a president, secondly, as a citizen, and thirdly, you cannot force people to love the enemy. That's impossible. What you can do is to make a pause and just decide on how we are going to live further on. What has to be done in order to put an end to the war, to prevent further wars, and how to find an approach to these territories which are temporarily occupied. This is a very difficult matter because part of these territories were occupied 8 years ago. And during the entire period of 8 years, they have been brainwashing people and children on whom they are. They've been telling them that they have preserved their lives. They have been telling lies that Ukrainians are fascists. They have been filling their heads with lies for many years. And it's very difficult because of that to find understanding. You definitely understand me what information policies mean. Therefore, we have to come up with a model where Ukraine will not lose its sovereignty, its territorial integrity. We cannot concede to it. But still, we have to find a model of understanding to prevent further wars between our territories that we control and temporary occupied territories. So whatever the discussions that we have in our negotiating delegations, I think that it's just the two of us, me and Putin, who can make an agreement on this. The second story is related to ultimatums that cannot be there, emanating from one country to another country. I mean, in general, and concretely in terms of Russia's ultimatums to Ukraine. And there cannot be any ultimatums from any country whatsoever to another country, regardless of the army it has, regardless of the finance, regardless of the size of the economy, because it's international law. It's about respect to the sovereignty of each country. Therefore, dialogue is the only way out. It is through dialogue that we have to resolve the matter of security guarantees for Ukraine. We do not want to give any country a possibility to attack us. Today it's the Russian Federation. Hopefully, any other country will not be willing to attack Ukraine's independence. But still, you can see that Belarus launched rockets against Ukraine at the very beginning. Therefore, that's a matter on the table right now. Therefore, NATO could be a source of guarantees for Ukraine, but we are not accepted as a member of NATO. So Ukraine has to seek for other security guarantees from individual countries that could be NATO members. And that is what we are proposing. A number of leaders of the world's countries could be a source of guarantees for Ukraine. They could be part of this circle of powerful countries. That is what we can talk about, security guarantees for Ukraine.